Continuing on with our examples in section 14.1, this video is now going to look at cosine graph examples. And what I've drawn on the smartboard is the basic cosine function, y equals cosine theta. And again, 5 key points to graph. However, the cosine, remember, always starts at the maximum value and it ends at the maximum value. And halfway in between, it is down here at the minimum value. And then in between, right here and right here, it's at the midpoint of the minimum and the maximum value. The amplitude, again, remember, is 1 for the basic cosine function. The frequency is 1, which means 1 cycle from 0 to 2 pi, which makes its period 2 pi. So the first period obviously ends at 2 pi. Now, keeping all that in mind, let's go to the bottom. And again, hopefully you have a sheet of graph paper. We're going to graph y equals cosine 7 theta for 1 cycle only. All right, so again, we need our key pieces of information. First of all, the amplitude will be 3. That means I need to label my y-axis up to 3. 1, 2, positive 3, and then down to negative 3. So that would be negative 1, negative 2, and negative 3 would be about right there. Our frequency is 7. That means if we were to graph all the way to 2 pi, you'd see 7 of these graphs. Well, we're not going to do that. We're just going to do 1 cycle. The period is 2 pi divided by b, which is 7. That's the key number, because that's the number that goes on our 5th dot. It's on the x-axis. So let's count 5 lines. And we're going to spread this one out, I think. So we're going to go 0, 1 line, 2 lines, 3 lines, 4 lines, 5 lines. Let's give that a try. So we're going to put 2 pi over 7 way out here. Okay? Oh, I'm sorry. I went 1 too far. 1 too far. 2 pi over 7 needs to be right there. All right. What's the halfway line? That would be this line right there. Well, times the bottom number by 2. You get 2 pi over 14, which reduces to pi over 7. What's the halfway point of that? Well, times the 7 by 2, and you'll get pi over 14. And that's what we count by. 1 pi over 14, 2 pi over 14. So that line's got to be 3 pi over 14 if you follow the pattern. And there we go. We have our x-axis labeled. The hardest part is now done. Very simply, I notice that the 3 is positive, so therefore the cosine starts at the maximum. So at 0, I'm going to be at 3. When I end my cycle, I'm going to be at 3. Halfway in between, I'm down here at the minimum. So at pi over 7, I better be down at negative 3. And then the other 2 dots are at 0, or halfway between the minimum and the maximum. And there you go, people. There is your cosine graph for 1 cycle of 3 cosine 7 theta. Pause the video if you need to copy that down, but otherwise, we'll go on to example 2. Now, at this stage of the game, you may want to try this on your own and pause the video. But at the top, again, I have the basic cosine graph right here. And what we're going to do is, example 2, I want you to graph y equals negative cosine 4 theta from 0 to 2 pi. Now, if you'd like to try this on your own and pause the video, please do so. All right, I'm going to do it for you. Check your answers if you did this on your own. First thing is the amplitude. The amplitude value is the a value. Well, it's not there. It's 1. So the amplitude is 1. So I'm just going to go up to positive 1, and I'm going to go down to negative 1. Very simple. Frequency. The frequency is the b value, which is 4. That means I'm going to have to draw 4 of these cycles from 0 to 2 pi. Period. The period is 2 pi divided by 4, which reduces to pi over 2, which is our key number. That's where our first cycle is going to end. Now let's do a little planning again. I need 4 cycles. Each cycle needs 20 dots or 20 lines. I'm not sure if I've got this on here. So again, I'm going to put these little halfway points in between. And now I've got enough lines. Well, my first cycle is going to end right there. Second cycle in there, third cycle in there, fourth cycle in there. So let's do some labeling. The first cycle ends right there. That's pi over 2. What is the halfway point? Well, times the bottom number by 2. This would be pi over 4. And what's the halfway point again of that? Times 4 by 2. And this would be pi over 8. Which makes this line right here 1 pi over 8, 2 pi over 8. This line's got to be 3 pi over 8. Kind of hard to see. It's kind of hard for me to squish those in there on the smartboard. But there's my first cycle. You've got to label all 5 numbers in your first cycle, including 0. Now, the second cycle ends here. Now, I'm counting by pi over 2. This distance right here is pi over 2, which means the next cycle will also be pi over 2. So I add those together, and basically I get 2 pi over 2, which reduces to 1 pi. And then I go another cycle, which is another pi over 2. So you add all those together, I have 3 pi's over 2. And then the last cycle is another pi over 2. If I add those together, I get 4 pi over 2, or where my fourth cycle will end will be at 2 pi. Now I'm going to erase all of that. Again, follow the pattern and count appropriately. Well, here we go. It's negative. So that means instead of starting at the maximum, this graph is flipped upside down, which means I now have to start at the minimum. So my minimum value will be negative 1, and when my cycle ends, it will be negative 1. Halfway in between at pi over 4, take that line out of there, at pi over 4, I'm going to be at the maximum then. And then halfway in between those, obviously, I'm going to have to cross the 0 lines. So my cosine graph, the first cycle, looks like that. Now again, let's follow the pattern. It starts at the minimum. It's going to end at the minimum, roughly about there. And then halfway in between, it's going to be at the maximum. And then the other 2 lines are 0. Now I'm going to draw this one dotted so you can distinguish the second cycle from the first cycle. And this pattern continues. Obviously, again, we're going to end down there. Halfway in between will be at the maximum. These 2 will be at zeros. And now I'm going to draw this solid again so you can distinguish the difference. And finally, my last cycle is going to follow the exact same pattern. Oops, sorry. That dot shouldn't be there. Right here, I should be at the maximum. And then this dot right here and this dot right there are halfway in between. And there you go. 4 cycles. Cycle 1, cycle 2, cycle 3, cycle 4 between 0 and 2 pi. So it works just like the sine graphs. I hope you don't have any questions, but if you do, please ask during class. But that is how you graph cosine functions.